In this episode of Locked On Capitals, I talk about Vitek Vanecek. Should the Washington Capitals consider retaining his services? We'll talk about all of that and more next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, and I want to thank you for making this your first listen or view of the day. Yes, this podcast is also available in video form, so head on over to YouTube and check that out. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in this episode, I'm going to talk about Vitek Vanecek. In the previous episode, I talked about Ilya Samsonov, and what I'm going to do here is just kind of showcase and talk a little bit about who the player is, a season review, and if the Capitals should try to retain Vitek's services. And I kind of tend to think that they should. If you take a look at Vitek Vanecek, they got him on a cheap contract. It was around $750,000. So to get a goaltender of that caliber is quite something, to be honest with you. Then later in the show, we are going to talk to you a little bit about the history, the scouting report on Vitek Vanecek. And then in the final segment, we are going to talk about if the Capitals should, in fact, try to re-sign Vitek. All right, so to start it off here, like what I was talking about in the previous podcast, that I know the knee-jerk reaction at the end of the season is that we should get rid of all the netminders. They're so horrible. But if you actually take a look at their records and statistics, they actually played rather well. The Washington Capitals got 100 points between Ilya Samsonov and Vitek Vanecek. And as you take a look around the NHL, you will notice that there are a lot of teams that did not get 100 points. So say what you will about the netminding situation in Washington. They were able to string together 100 points. Now, that says a lot for that tandem. Just based on what you heard about them in the media and the Capitals beat writers, you would have thought that they were just a horrible tandem. And I know that there has been inconsistency, and that was their biggest issue. If anyone ever complains about the Washington Capitals netminding situation, it's always the consistency, and it's a valid point. But if you zoom in the lens a little bit, just really take the face off the clock and look at the gears, what you will see is the defense oftentimes is what was folding in front of them. The greatest goaltender in the world can only make certain saves. They need that solid defense in front of them. If you take a look at some really great goaltenders that were traded and moved to other teams, sometimes you'll notice that there was a big drop off, and you kind of look at what was wrong there. More specifically, if you take a look at Braden Holtby, when he left Washington and went out to Vancouver, he had quite a horrible year there. And what is one of the things that was wrong with Vancouver was a horrible defense. They did not have the Washington Capitals defense, or at least the 2018 Washington Capitals defense in front of them. And subsequently, Braden Holtby had a horrible season in Vancouver. He has since then, of course, moved on to Dallas. He's injured, but when he wasn't injured, he was playing rather well. So that's what I'm saying, is sometimes you need to just kind of take a little bit, a finer tooth comb and take a look at the back of their hockey card, so to speak, and see what kind of player is Vitek Vanecek. Because if you take a look at him overall, he was drafted in the second round, 39th overall. And, generally speaking, teams don't draft a goalie that high if they don't have high hopes for him. And if you take a look at Vitek Vanecek historically, he has really stood on his head when it mattered most. I know that he got off to a rough start in the series against the Florida Panthers, but if you take, if you're able to look past that, you will see that Vitek Vanecek has been, fairly steady for the Washington Capitals. His career record is 41-22. He has a goals against average of 2.68 and a save percentage of .908. So, like I'm saying, taking a look at the back of his hockey card, his stats are not too bad, not too shabby at all. So that's what I'm talking about. In this podcast, I'm not trying to say that Vitek Vanecek, or in the previous podcast, that Ilya Samsonov should be the number one netminder. What I am saying, however, is that they are viable options as a backup netminder or a number two. So before the Capitals make any hasty decisions and kick Vitek Vanecek or Ilya Samsonov down the road, they might want to stop and think about that decision a little bit and just kind of take a look at what they bring to the team. Because if you remember Vitek Vanecek, when we lost him briefly to the expansion draft in Seattle, how up in arms were Washington Capitals fans that he had left? I mean, there was almost pandemonium within the Washington Capitals. What are they going to do in net? We lost Vitek Vanecek. Well, through some hocus pocus by Brian McClellan, he was able to get Vitek Vanecek back by sending Dylan and some draft picks up to Winnipeg and this and that. And anyway, we got Vitek Vanecek back on the team. And that's what I'm talking about, is that I know that it's easy to get caught up in temporary feelings, but just kind of widen the lens and take a look at their stats, their analytics, and you will see that in this case, Vitek Vanecek is a pretty solid netminder, at least as a number two. I can't overemphasize that enough. As a number two, I still think that the Washington Capitals need to pick up that veteran netminder. But that could be a long list of different players. I've heard Braden Holtby coming back here for the nostalgia Washington Capitals fans. I've heard Marc-Andre Fleury, but it ultimately seems that Marc-Andre Fleury is not interested in coming to the Capitals. I think that it has to do mostly with his long history with the Penguins, the bitter rivalry that has gone back and forth. And then more recently with the Vegas Golden Knights, when the Washington Capitals faced the Golden Knights in 2018, the Washington Capitals reigned victorious over the Golden Knights. So I think that ultimately that's what it's about. And I think the probability of Marc-Andre Fleury coming to the Capitals is rather small. So I think that the Capitals fans need to move on from that idea, but I think that they're bundling, some players together, something like that, to get that big marquee name netminder that they so sorely need. And I'm not so sure that it's Braden Holtby either. I think, like I say, that's for the nostalgia Washington Capitals fans, the ones that are like, oh my God, this is 2018 all over again. I don't think that that's going to be the case. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, but highly unlikely. But, in this episode, Vitek Vanecek, I do think that he serves as a decent option as a backup netminder. I do think that he is a netminder that would do a good job as a starting netminder in a limited capacity. But you kind of saw, overall, when the workload was on his shoulders more heavily, he seemed to falter a little bit more. But I mean, that's what I'm saying. Ultimately, I think that he would be a great backup netminder for the Washington Capitals. So before we start going and making any hasty decisions saying, we got to get Vitek Vanecek out there, take a look at, who are they going to get to replace him? Because a lot of the free agents or restricted free agents out there, they have worse records than Vitek Vanecek in this example. So that's what I'm saying, is you cannot just always make hasty decisions before you start parting with some of these integral parts of your team. All right, so after the break here, we are going to continue to talk about Vitek Vanecek. We'll take a look at his scouting report and what the outlook is for Vitek Vanecek. But first, this episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing number of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questions and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing only the brands their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to Rock Auto at home and in your pocket. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership? Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for 20 years. Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer. They have everything you could need, from brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, even new carpet. So head on over to Rock Auto. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. Why spend all this extra money? Here's a good example. Honda Odyssey fuel pump, $353 from a chain store. Only $216 from Rock Auto. So that's what I'm talking about. With the ever-increasing gas prices, you need to save money where you can. That is why you need Rock Auto. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right locked on in their How Did You Hear About Us section so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Thanks for making Locked On Capitals your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. So in this next segment, we are going to talk a little bit more about Vitek Vanecek. And, that's what I'm talking about, is that we can't just be willing to part with these players so quickly. If you look at Vitek Vanecek historically, Vanecek was named as the Capitals' backup goaltender shortly before the 2020-21 season, backing up Ilya Samsonov. However, Samsonov was placed on the COVID-19 protocol list in mid-January after only 2 appearances, and Vanecek was subsequently thrust into the spotlight for the Capitals. Vanecek started in his first NHL game on January 15th, 2021, saving 30 of 31 shots and earning his first victory as the Capitals defeated the Buffalo Sabres 2-1. And I think that that was kind of one of the moments that kind of fate with the option as a starting netminder for the Washington Capitals, and he went on to play quite a few games based on the fact that Henrik Lundqvist was out with a heart condition, and Ilya Samsonov spent a pretty good chunk of the season either under COVID protocol or disciplinary actions that was taken because of it. So Vitek Vanecek was the guy that was able to answer the bell and help the Washington Capitals when they needed him. And it was just a fluke kind of accident in not the playoffs this year, but the year before, where it was a groin injury where he went into full splits, and, that great season that he had put together was over. But all in all, Vitek Vanecek played well, and that's what he's able to do. Is he seems to track the puck really well. I would say he has a slight advantage over Ilya Samsonov in that regard. And that's the one thing about Vitek Vanecek is he is kind of more, I think, mechanically sound over Ilya Samsonov, but I ultimately think that either one of them make a decent option as a backup netminder for the Washington Capitals, and that's why I think they need to kind of just take a closer look before they make any hasty decisions. Because like I say, some of the options out there aren't as great. Vanecek won NHL's Rookie of the Month for January 2021. He recorded his first NHL shutout on March 15th in a 6-0 victory over the Buffalo Sabres. When Samsonov landed in protocol again, Vanecek started in Game 1 for the Washington Capitals in the 2021 Stanley Cup playoffs. However, he was injured early in the game when he was replaced by Craig Anderson. On July 21st, 2021, Vanecek was selected from the Capitals at the 2021 NHL expansion draft by the Seattle Kraken. The Kraken traded him back to the Capitals a week later for a second-round pick in 2023. Vanecek's high save shutout came on January 28th, 2022, when the Capitals beat the Dallas Stars 5-0. So that is, just a bit of a history on Vitek Vanecek. Over time, I know that the most recent memory of him was getting yanked in the Stanley Cup playoffs against the Florida Panthers. And I think that is ultimately kind of what left a sour taste in many Washington Capitals fans' mouths, was the fact that, this guy that was supposed to be so great, better than Ilya Samsonov, however, ends up getting yanked. And I think that is when, a lot of people started to draw into question if Vitek Vanecek had a future with the Washington Capitals. Now, the Capitals are in an interesting position right now because they have 2 RFAs in the form of Ilya Samsonov and Vitek Vanecek, and I don't think that they are going to sign both of them and possibly either of them. But what I'm trying to do in this podcast is I'm trying to make a case that I think that it's worth a second look, because if you take a look at their stats or take a look at the back of their hockey card, if you will, their stats are pretty good overall. Like I was talking about earlier, if you take a look at Vitek Vanecek, career-wise, he is 41-22 with a goals against average of 2.68 and a .908 save percentage. And then in the 2021-2022 season, he has 20 wins, 12 losses, a save percentage of .908, and a goals against average of 2.67. So not too shabby for a guy that they, kind of want to kick down the road. And then if you take a look at the 20 season and the 21 season, he was 21-10. He had a 1031 shots against. He had a 936, he had a .908 save percentage and a 2.69 goals against. So again, those numbers are not too bad for a backup netminder. And that's what I'm saying. And I can't overemphasize it enough, as I think he serves as a viable number 2 netminder, or number 1, a 1A and a 1B, whatever the termage is that you want to look at it. I think that, he is a goalie that could, bear a starting role if called upon in limited capacity. But That's what I'm talking about. If you look at the RFAs out there right now, there is not a lot of great options as like a number two because we all know that they need a great starting netminder. There's a lot of questions out there as to who that will be exactly, and I think those will be answered here, by July anyway. And July anyway, where free agency is coming out. So the Capitals do have a lot of questions about the future in net, and that's what I'm trying to spotlight here. Is that I think that Vitek Vanecek, he deserves a second look before we just, kick him on down the road. All right, so after the break here, we are going to continue to talk Vitek Vanecek and what is the future for Vitek Vanecek. We'll talk about that, but first, all right, welcome back. In this episode, we are talking about Vitek Vanecek in his role on the Washington Capitals. And I think that the outlook for him overall is pretty good. And like I say, and I've talked about in this podcast, is I think that ultimately, he serves as a great backup for whoever they happen to choose as a number one netminder. His cap hit right now, look at this, 716,667. So that's not too bad. He's on, like I say, year three of a 3-year contract. So he's an RFA right now. His career earnings with the Washington Capitals are 4,292,500. So look at him. That is some value in Vitek Vanecek. I don't think that you will get him to sign another deal under the at least $1 million mark. Some people say that he is due at least $2 million per year. So I think that he ultimately is deserving of that. If you take a look at that Capitals, kind of a bit more when he was an unproven commodity. Right now, I think that, he is deserving a raise. So whatever team happens to pick him up, I think they will pay him more money. So the scouting report on Vitek Vanecek is he has the reflexes, quickness, and lateral movement needed to be a starting NHL goaltender. Also boasts a good glove hand, still needs to get stronger, has to improve at tracking pucks because many of the shots that get past him are from distance. And if you look at Hockey Viz or any of those websites out there, you see that is, his Achilles heel is those shots that are from distance. He has a hard time. I don't know if there's guys screening him or what the case is, but that is the book on Vitek Vanecek, is that he has a hard time stopping shots from great distance, is still learning the tendencies of shooters and how to acclimate himself to the smaller rinks in North America. Long range potential from a scout here, talented goaltender with a little upside. So that's what I'm saying. I would say that the book on him, the back of his hockey card is not as great as Ilya Samsonov, and that might catch a lot of people by surprise. I think that a lot of people just take a look at Ilya Samsonov and think that he's a joke out there, but actually, if you take a look at his stats, they're not too bad. But ultimately, that was a scouting report on Vitek Vanecek and what they thought. But I still think that is some of the issue that he has to this day, is that he has a hard time tracking the puck, especially some of the times from great distance. And when I was talking about earlier that he has a good time tracking the puck, that is from shots that are closer up, where sometimes Ilya Samsonov struggles in those situations. I think that, between Vitek Vanecek and Ilya Samsonov, you have two viable options for really great netminders and for the Washington Capitals. So before they start, parting with these netminders, they really need to start asking themselves some questions is, okay, between Vitek and Ilya, who are we going to sign? I don't think that they have the money, or I don't think they really want to sign both of them. So that's what it's going to come down to. And they're going to have to ask themselves, is which one of those netminders is best suited. I'm going to use the Pittsburgh Penguins example. They had Louis Domingue starting in net for the Pittsburgh Penguins in the playoffs. Do you think that was in their beginning of the season to have him start in net? No way. So that's what I'm talking about. Is it's not even just the number one netminder. It's not just the number two netminder. You have to have depth throughout. I mean, they should have had someone better in that case. For AHL affiliate for the Pittsburgh Penguins, Wilkes-Barre Scranton. That's what I'm thinking of there. Better in-house than going with Louis dimming, and not to disparage him, as he played rather well, considering, he was just kind of thrust into it. If you heard, different reports, he was just kind of eating some spicy rice and chicken, and then all of a sudden, he gets called into the game and actually played rather well. So bringing this back to the Capitals is that that's what they need to look at. They need to assess their overall goaltending situation, what they have as a number two, and that's what we're talking about in these first two episodes here, is who is going to be the backup. In the first episode, it was Ilya Samsonov. This episode is Vitek Vanecek. And to see what they have, I think that ultimately, knee-jerk reaction, if I'm going to give you an answer of who the Washington Capitals will go with, it is going to be Ilya Samsonov. And why is it? Because they have more invested in him. He was drafted higher. And just his overall stats are better than Vitek Vanecek's overall. People have argued with me, no, what are you looking at? Well, I just rattled off the stats for him. So that the stats are the stats. And if that's what we're going by, that Ilya Samsonov is the better between the two of them. But I do think that if for whatever reason they cannot keep Ilya Samsonov, that Vitek Vanecek is a viable option as a number two netminder for the Washington Capitals. So that's what I'm talking about, that, before you, like I say, and I can't say that enough, just don't make any hasty decisions, don't act on emotion, that, I want to get rid of this player because they did this or that. If you take a look at Vitek Vanecek's, his history, overall, he is actually pretty good. So just looking at some of the awards he won, games played in 2021, 21, 37, that's the seventh most. 3-star awards, Rookie of the Month in the 2020-21 season in January. For wins in the 20 season 21-21, ranked 7th. Shutouts in the 21-22 season 4, that's 6th. And minutes in the 2021 season 21-15, that is 10th. So just taking a look at it, both of those netminders that I've talked about in the last couple days here, options as a number two option. That's what I'm talking about. Number two for the Washington Capitals. So that's, before we make any hasty decisions, let's take a close look as to what we have in the organization. Thank you for making Locked On Capitals your first listen. Now make your second listen Locked On NHL. From first round matchups to each Stanley Cup kiss, Locked On NHL covers the playoffs like no other. Hear the latest news and opinions from our local experts every Monday through Friday. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. So once again, thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals.